R Fletcher. Now sit back and prepare to be entertained. Welcome to the Dripping Nose podcast with your hosts, Krystle Matar and Michael Sick as Fuck Fletcher. Today we are joined by the amazing Mihir from Fantasy Book Critic. He is a champion of all things fantasy, has been for years, and has been an unwavering voice in the community, supportive, sort of above and beyond. Not quite like weaponized positivity like Krystle has, but still like such a really good person. It makes all that rest of us sort of look bad in comparison. So we're annoyed to have him here. Mihir, welcome.
Speak for yourself.
Thank you for that wonderful welcome. It almost feels like you're talking about somebody else, not me though. This doesn't sound like me. Like I know Krystle is a force for positivity. I'm more of like
no.
Oh well, it doesn't harm to be nice. So it's kind of like that.
You're just accidentally positive.
Yeah.
All right.
And I want it stated for the record that, Mihir, you're also a polyamorous reader like I am, where fantasy is not your only love. It is a great love, but it's not alone.
Yes.
And I always appreciate that, because sometimes it feels like I'm a little bit of an island in a fantasy sea, which is
what are you talking about?
Great ocean. Well, you too,
I read all genres of fantasy.
Yeah, thanks for illustrating my point.
And science fiction.
Yeah.
I'm
SFF.
all over the place.
And horror sometimes, right?
What?
Horror sometimes, or no?
Or, yeah, very rarely, and more like historical nonfiction. But that's all just research.
That's a whole different thing in itself.
Fantasy.
Yeah. So, Mihir.
Yes, sir.
Fantasy Book Critic.
Yes.
Tell us about that. Tell us how the germ of that idea, how that was born, how it came together. Give us some of your history.
Sure. Well, firstly, I had nothing to do with it. It was all started by this wonderful gentleman.
Next question.
No, but there's a story in itself, because I'm a part of Fantasy Book Critic, and I'm very thankful to be a part of Fantasy Book Critic. But it was the brainchild of this lovely our owner and the first Fantasy Book Critic, so to speak, Robert Thompson. He was the one who kind of came up with it in 2007. And, of course, as blogging probably, and you both as authors know, once you start reviewing, once you start, going out, putting your name out of the world, more and more stuff comes onto you. We pretty soon realized that, it couldn't be handled by just one person. And this was, of course, in the heydays of blogging back in 2000s, 2005, 2006, 2007. So when there were so very few bloggers, so when publishers found out that, people... there are these people who will read books and give us blurbs and, help promote our books for free. They were just sending all sorts of books to them. So Robert then kind of, got two more people, Liviu and Cindy, who helped him, spread his genre interest, so to speak. And then around that time, because I was in India and I was starved for books, because let me tell you, we kind of had internet back in India, but it wasn't fast. We had, and you all both probably will know this, the dial tone internet. That's what I had.
Yes.
The dial tone internet was on the mercy of the gods. And
yeah,
I was really hoping sometimes it wouldn't rain, because if it rained, connections was lost. So for me, and like Krystle mentioned, we are both kind of not stuck to the fantasy genre. I was also a thriller mystery reader, of which surprisingly there was a lot more books back then in India, but fantasy was just slim pickings. It was, maybe you had something and maybe you didn't, but like I didn't know anybody else whom to talk to. So when I was going online, I happened upon these blogs. That's how I found out, like, there's this whole other thing. And I happened to got talking to Robert because his blog was really interesting. He used to interview authors, and I love that. I wanted to talk to authors about what makes you write the books that you do. And so I started emailing him. I would,
mental health
chat
problems.
about, and I would chat to him. And then one day he was like, you seem to be wanting to read books so much. Why don't you try reviewing? And this was thankfully when I happened to, immigrate to the United States. So I was like, am I allowed to do that? And he was like, if you want to. Yes. And I was like, yeah, sure. Here's an interview with one of the authors who just got a book out. And he was very happy with the interview. And he was like, well, do you want to do this more and more? I'm like, what does that mean? He's like, you get free books, you have to read them, and you have to review them. I'm like, done. Like, we wouldn't be fully finished. I'm like, done, just sign me up.
Yeah.
And that's how I kind of got started in Fantasy Book Critic, I think in 2009. But it's been then, and it's been the driving force for me. Like, I love books. I want to read more and more, and of course, diversify. And then I found out there's more genres of fantasy as well. And then, of course, I got to meet all of you lovely folks, and now I'm hooked. So you just can't put me away anywhere.
A year or two later, right?
Pretty much.
It hasn't been that long, man. That's that. I don't think I realized how far back it stretched, because just coming into the scene recently, everything was just kind of established, but I took for granted like how long it took for everybody to be so established. So it's always really interesting to hear these stories of like especially folks like you and folks like Ben Galley, who we just talked to, talking about like the bad old days when the scene was just getting started.
I reviewed Ben's book back in the day in 2011 because
really?
I remember he had emailed us, and he was just, of course, indie fantasy was just like, it was not even called indie fantasy, it was just self-published, and he had sent us nice email with like, I'm a British author, I'm developing these courses, here's my book MNSK, and I reviewed the first 2 of his books. I don't know if he remembers really that or not, but I remember.
That's really cool.
So, that's right. We had Ben on last week. I know what's going on.
Yeah, last week. I mean, I guess it depends on the order of these episodes, but for us, it was last week, and he was talking about kind of a similar timeline where he was publishing in 2000. Oh, here's my test, my pop quiz. I'm about to fail. I think he said 2008, but I think I'm also wrong. So.
I think it was closer to 2011 or 12, if I'm not wrong, because I remember him being in that decade.
His first book, I think he said, came out like end of 2009, early 2010.
Oh, yes, okay.
Was his very first release, yeah.
So
it's weird. Like,
plausible.
FBC, Fantasy Book Critic, has been around way longer than I have. Like, I was 2009, I was just sitting down to write Beyond Redemption.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have any published short stories yet. I'd written my first book, 88, but it hadn't been published yet. Holy shit.
Copies of that though online.
Everything went so terribly downhill after that.
And now you're so
youthful here we
and
are.
glowing.
And here we are. The culmination of many bad decisions.
Yep. One after the other. It's all the dominoes are coming together.
Yeah. So what? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to talk about David Gemmell, so you should go first.
Oh, okay.
Once we start that, we'll be there forever.
So how for you and and the folks at FBC, how is this sort of like the landscape of indie, but from the viewpoint of reviewers and bloggers, how has that changed for you?
Tremendously, in a single word, just to put it out there. But first, again, looking back, this was, indie and self-published books started slowly coming out in 2000. Well, even kind of before 2010, I would say, because I remember Michael J. Sullivan's books. We actually reviewed, and Livio and Cindy were one of the first proponents of his books. Of like, they're really good, the Ryrie and Revelations. And I remember, having the older, like his indie published versions as well. So those, I don't have the copies of it right now, but those I've showed them off. But I remember FBC being one of his first proponents, and it was kind of like, you were wading out into a sea with like few things in far between, because there's not that many books being published as well, to be honest with you. It was just like, like somebody would just reach out to us like Ben Galley did, and I would be like, oh, this sounds interesting, let me get into it. I remember David Dalglish, he was also another author who reached out to us. He already had like a successful half-orc series, but then his new series called Shadow Dance, I was like, it was about assassins, and I was like, okay, I'm in. And then I happened to read them. I love them. He also, of course, then went along with Michael J. Sullivan. They got picked up by Orbit. But then there was this unknown newcomer by the name of Anthony Ryan, who nobody knew about. And I remember Michael J. Sullivan actually was telling us, like, hey, he has self-published a book called Blood Song. It's really good. Both me and Livio read it. We were like, holy cow, this is amazing. Yeah. And if this is what indie fantasy or self-published fantasy can do, then we're like, this is it. This is the best book I've read in a long, long, long time. And so then onwards, I slowly you started hearing more and more stories. Of course, Michael, you were traditionally published. That's how I came to know about you, because in the heyday of Grimdark, it was like Anthony Ryan. Again, thanks to Anthony Ryan, he pointed out there's this upcoming Canadian author by the name of Michael R Fletcher. You got to check his book out. And then
that's so cool.
I happened to find out about Rob J. Hayes, because he's the only author I can think of who came up with such, and I say this with all the love in my heart, ugly covers for his first trilogy. I wish I had them. No, I'm not even kidding. I wish I had them to show them off, because I know they're on my blog. His first trilogy, it was only ebooks. The covers are something to see for, and I wish I can link them. I'll probably send you the link to you guys so you can have them in the footnotes somewhere. But there's some really ugly covers, but the books are amazing. And so it was just more like a hit and miss, slowly, like when you'd find this one gem, and then you'd try to find more of, something like that. But it was just, nobody knew. There was not really much, but Amazon was really great, because Amazon, had this really cool feature, again, way back in the day. If you bought this book, its algorithm would be like, maybe you like this one. And slowly, it started discovering more and more authors. I think 2015-ish was when SPFBO started. And so that was like another major push for indie fantasy, of like, okay, here's something where you can find about good indie fantasy books, or at least indie fantasy books. I'm not saying good just because of my opinion, but it's like Mark Lawrence heads it. So it's like, there's a stamp of authority. And then I think, which you both can agree, there has been a deluge of fantasy books, because there's no gatekeepers. Yeah. Nobody's telling you like, you can't publish this, or this won't sell. If anybody has an idea, if they have a good cover, if they have written it well, and they put it out, it will find its audience. Maybe it won't be a huge bestseller, but it will find its audience. And of course, now here we are, where indie fantasy books are just so amazing, so much out there, that sometimes it's even hard for us to know what's good and what's not. I mean, not good in the sense like, because we haven't read it, or we haven't gotten to it.
Yeah, but it's so hard to tell, like unless somebody's talking about a book, there's just so many of them that I think that's what you mean by good. It's like, I've noticed this book and I'm willing to give it a shot, because this person whose opinion I trust has said, these things. And, even people who didn't like a book sometimes can sell it to me, because it's like, I didn't like it because of these tropes. And I'm like, oh, well, those are my favorites. Yeah. So I'm so sold, so yeah, I think the discoverability comes down to people talking, which is why, we're all so appreciative of folks like you and like bloggers, just generally.
Not folks like me, I'm just one of them. It's more of the other bigger names, like, who are doing the more. And now BookTube, it's
I disagree with you trying to imply that you're somehow smaller or unimportant, but I think those sizes are kind of almost not the point. Like, I know you're trying to say, like, there are some YouTubers who have huge followings, but they can only read so many books. And I think having dozens of small bloggers in some ways is equally or more so valuable, because the dozens of small bloggers can cover a lot more books than one mega star can.
I see your point. Yes, because when there's more of us, at least that means more authors who get more people to read. No, that's absolutely right.
Yeah.
So in that way, I'm a small cog in the blogging machine. So yeah.
And it's a great machine. So yeah.
I don't think any of the sort of like big booktuber folks have read anything of mine, or like, at least not that I'm aware of. So everything, all of my everything, my whole career is small is blogs like FBC.
Yeah,
it's word of mouth. Like the whole thing is word of mouth, and
awesome books. That's why it's because of that. It's not that I mean, yes, I love you as well because you're a funny person, but besides that, you write awesome books.
Fuck you, calling funny.
Don't make me laugh. It's gonna make me really vomit out cough. That's not gonna be good for your podcast.
So we just talked about how important blogs like Fantasy Book Critic is to the indie scene, and to writers and to promoting books and stuff. So one of the hardest things, and I remember it from the earliest days, when you get your first book, it's how do you approach these blogs, these reviewers? So Mihir, if you could a word or two of advice for the new writer on how to sort of approach blogs? What's the right way to go about that?
Read up their instructions on their blog, namely, because a lot of bloggers will have, if they're closed or not. Secondly, they'll also have instructions about like what they like to read. Just for example, I love urban fantasy. I love historical fiction, thrillers. I am not the biggest fan of romantic fantasy. Nothing wrong against that, but I'm just not. I'm not a good reader.
Yeah, you're not the reader for it.
So if somebody would send me a romantic fantasy, even if it is appealing to me, or even if some of the elements are appealing, I'm still probably not going to enjoy it as much. Now, if somebody sends me a dark fantasy, a dark fantasy, I'm there. So there's that. So read up on the blogger or the blog in question. Like, are they accepting titles? What are their submission guidelines? Do not. And for the again, I'm forgiving. I'm saying this with all humility. Like, if somebody mistakenly sends me something, they send the book, I'll be like, okay, I'm really sorry, but we're not accepting. I know there's some bloggers out there who will be like, no, you're kind of banned, and they might block you. So please do not send them the book. If you can, and I know this is hard for some people because you don't know how to talk to people in the sense that if you can, try to follow them online on their spaces, like on Twitter or on Facebook. Oh, Facebook, that's such an old thing, but maybe somewhere else. But try talking to them, just like commenting on their posts or just talking to them, because a lot of times when you get friendly with people, they're more likely to give you a chance, or if their book might interest you. But don't be like, hey, hi, my name's so and so, here's my book. Again, that can be hard, and it's imagine yourself, if you are a person who's reviewing stuff, and if you get slammed with so many books, it's going to be hard for you. Some people, it's just it's just a natural instinct to be like, I don't want your book. I have my favorites to read. Like, I want to read those books. I'll get your book if I like it, but then the liking factor has to come. If you start approaching them in a friendly manner, so if that's possible for you, try that. I would recommend Twitter, following these two lovely people, Michael R Fletcher and Krystle Matar. They're very friendly. You get to know from them of like what bloggers, some insights into bloggers or insights into booktubers as well. So there's that. And lastly, don't be rude and don't take it personally. Like, if they cannot read your book, it's nothing against you. They honestly do not have the time, because almost, I can tell you, all of us do it for free. I know some people also have Patreons. Good for them. I do it for free. I've been doing it for free. All of FBC is for free. Like, every review, every interview, every post that we make, we do it out of our own personal time. Almost all of us have families. We have our work as well. So it's trying to carve out the time amidst all of that to do the stuff for FBC. So if we have to say no, it's not because we hate you or we find you despicable. No, it's not that. It's purely because I have to read something else, or my kids are wanting me to do something else, or I want to read something for fun. And I honestly, it's between your book and that book for fun. I'm going to pick the book for fun just because that's my mental escape. So there's that. I don't know if that's really helpful, but you can always say hi on Twitter.
Yeah. And I would say, like, jumping off of that as well, a really great insight to a blogger's likes is actually the reviews that they post, talking about books that they really like. And so not just following them on Twitter, but going the extra step to checking out their books, and the things that they've enjoyed. If you've got, if I'm approaching Mihir and I see 6 David Gemmell reviews and an Anthony Ryan review and all that stuff, I would tell you, I thought maybe you would be the right person for my book, because these are some of my influences as well. And so that connection of paying attention to what you like, I think, goes a long way. And then also it gives you something to talk about, even if, like, Mihir, you say, I can't right now, I'm too busy, but now we're friends, which is really cool. And I think those personal connections do so much work that we're not even aware of, especially if we happen to be doing them right, because it feels like nothing's really happening. But I can just attest to it that I fell into my market by accident because I was chatty and making friends, and then it just so happened to be that my friends then also enjoyed my book. So yeah.
And one of the first things I noticed about you, Krystle, was the fact that you love David Gemmell. That is like a instant connection for me. Anybody who loves David Gemmell, I feel like a bond with them. Like, they love the same thing that I do. Oh, and one more thing, sorry. It doesn't have to be a book review. It can be like a book cover reveal. It can be a spotlight reveal. It can just be them showing off your book and book with the links to buy your book, saying that, hey, I don't have the time to read this, but this might be interesting for anybody. If it looks nice, so there's that too. So
I know. I personally do a lot of cover reveals before we go blog, because I'd like to do something, but I can't read any faster than I already do, and it's like 2 books a month, so I'm not gonna be able to.
And you're a writer, so you have to more time for that as well. So that's a big deal, bigger deal.
But I am hoping that the cover reveals are helping. And I think they are, and they're fun. It's a lot of fun to celebrate with people.
They bring eyes on the book, It's like, somebody like me who has never seen that book, or somebody else like sees it, and you're like, oh, that seems interesting. It's just more eyes. It's always helpful.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Sorry. All right, so we just hit the 20-ish minute mark.
Yeah.
Shall we wrap it up here, and then we're going to be back next week or the week after or 3 weeks later? Who the fuck knows? That's up to the random scheduling gods, who will remain nameless. And Mihir, anything you kind of want to throw out about anything before we sign off?
Well, no, thank you for having me, and I look forward to getting out of the garage for the next episode, so that'll be fun. So I hope it's soon, pretty much soon, because I have some books to talk about with you folks. And then thank you to everyone watching. This has been fun.
Yeah.
Help me.
Please don't pay attention to Mihir signaling for help. Nobody on audio only heard that, so it didn't count.
Oh, I need better tips to Dirk Ashton. He didn't really prepare me for this.
All right, so we're gonna sign off before he manages to figure out Morse code to send for help. Thank you everybody for tuning in and watching us torture Mihir a little bit, and we'll see you in the next one.
Ciao.